Victory Gardens won the war and they can save us again. Subscribe to After the Sirens and leave a comment right now telling us where you're watching from, because this channel exists for serious historians and preparedness-minded viewers who understand that the past is not nostalgia, it is instruction. Today's episode is one of those rare cases where World War II offers a blueprint not just for understanding history, but for surviving the future. During the Second World War, the United States, Britain, Canada, and much of the Allied world faced a problem that terrified military planners more than enemy bombs' food collapse. Submarines were sinking cargo ships faster than they could be replaced. Fertilizer was diverted to explosives. Farm labor vanished into uniform. The solution that prevented famine did not come from generals or factories. It came from backyards, schoolyards, rooftops, and vacant city lots. Ordinary civilians quietly produced nearly half of all vegetables consumed by the nation, not as a hobby, but as a strategic weapon. These were victory gardens, and they were not symbolic morale boosters. They were a decentralized food system that worked under extreme pressure. If you think food security is a modern concern, this episode will permanently change how you understand civilian power during total war, and why this forgotten system may be more relevant now than at any point since 1945. Victory Gardens were not a spontaneous trend, they were a coordinated civilian mobilization rooted in logistics. By 1942, Allied shipping losses were catastrophic. Britain was importing nearly 70% of its food before the war, and German U-boats were deliberately targeting grain and meat shipments. In the United States, the War Food Administration recognized that industrial agriculture could not meet both military and civilian demand simultaneously. Rather than increasing centralized production, which required fuel, transport, and labor already stretched thin, governments turned to radical decentralization. Citizens were encouraged, trained, and supplied to grow food themselves. The result was staggering. By 1944, over 20 million victory gardens in the United States alone produced an estimated 40% of all fresh vegetables consumed nationwide. This was not gardening. This was wartime logistics executed at the household level. Victory Gardens succeeded because they were treated as a serious civic duty. Governments issued planting guides based on climate zones, soil conditions, and caloric yield per square foot. Crops were selected not for variety, but for efficiency. Potatoes, beans, carrots, cabbage, and tomatoes dominated because they stored well, preserved easily, and delivered reliable nutrition. Citizens were taught crop rotation, composting, seed saving, and pest control through pamphlets, radio broadcasts, and community demonstrations. In Britain's Dig for Victory campaign, unused land was legally converted into cultivation zones. Public parks, palace lawns, and railway embankments became food-producing assets. This level of coordination turned civilians into a parallel agricultural force that absorbed shock when industrial supply chains failed. Food production during wartime was not only about calories, it was about morale and control in an era of rationing. By growing their own food, civilians reduced pressure on ration systems, freeing industrially produced goods for soldiers and allies. More importantly, it gave people agency in a war where most contributions felt distant. Families tracked yields the way factories tracked output. Children learned discipline, delayed gratification, and responsibility. Communities shared surplus, seeds, and labor. In an age of aerial bombardment and uncertainty, tending a garden anchored people to routine and purpose. This psychological stability mattered. Governments understood that hunger breeds unrest faster than defeat on the battlefield. After 1945, victory gardens disappeared rapidly. Industrial agriculture, cheap fuel, global shipping, and supermarket convenience replaced local resilience. The skills that sustained nations under existential threat were dismissed as obsolete. This was not progress, it was a strategic trade-off. Centralized food systems are efficient in stable conditions but fragile under disruption. Weather shocks, fuel shortages, geopolitical conflict and fertilizer dependency now expose vulnerabilities that Victory Gardens once neutralized. The Second World War demonstrated that food security is not solely an agricultural issue, it is a national resilience issue. When food production is decentralized, no single failure point can trigger collapse. Modern application does not require wartime propaganda or government coercion. It requires, understanding the principles. First, prioritize caloric efficiency over aesthetics. Leafy greens are valuable, but staple crops matter more. A small plot dedicated to potatoes, beans, and squash can supply meaningful calories with minimal inputs. Second, seed independence is critical. WWII gardeners saved seeds because supply chains were unreliable. Today, learning seed saving protects against market shortages and rising costs. Third, preservation is as important as production. Victory Gardens worked because civilians canned, dried, and stored harvests. Modern equivalents include pressure canning, dehydration, and fermentation. Finally, community coordination multiplies impact. Neighborhoods can divide crop responsibilities, share tools, and exchange surplus, recreating wartime efficiency without bureaucracy. The most overlooked lesson of Victory Gardens is cultural discipline. People accepted seasonal eating, labor-intensive food preparation, and reduced waste because survival demanded it. Modern societies often assume technology will solve scarcity. WWII proved that behavior matters more than tools. A shovel, seeds, and knowledge outperformed industrial systems when those systems failed. For historians, this challenges narratives that center victory solely on factories and generals. For survivalists, it confirms that resilience is built long before crisis arrives through habits, skills, and community trust. Victory Gardens did not win battles directly, but they sustained the societies that did. They preserved shipping capacity, stabilized home fronts, and prevented civilian hunger from undermining war efforts. They were silent, decentralized, and devastatingly effective. In an era increasingly defined by supply chain fragility, climate uncertainty, and geopolitical tension, this WWII model deserves serious reconsideration, not as nostalgia, but as strategy. Subscribe to After the Sirens, share this video with someone who thinks food security is guaranteed, and comment below with one historical civilian strategy you believe deserves renewed attention. History does not repeat, but it instructs, and ignoring it has consequences.